Hi, I'm the SpaceVenture historian. Sorry if I sound a little weird. I had a nose job earlier last week, but I think the results speak for themselves, don't you think? Yeah? Anyway, fucking hell, how does one even begin a video on SpaceVenture? You'd think after a decade of development I'd have given this just an ounce of thought, but I honestly haven't. So I'm just gonna freewheel this the way I normally do. I'm just gonna blurt shit out in whatever order it pops into my head, and hopefully by the end of it I'll come out the other side with something that vaguely resembles a coherent overview. I somehow doubt it, but let's just dive in and see what happens. SpaceVenture is a spiritual successor to the Space Quest series. It was kickstarted back in 2012 with a punch to the face, and the punches kept coming, but I'm not going to get into too much detail about that. That's already been covered elsewhere in great detail, including on this channel, so let's just focus on talking about the game itself. It takes place in the same universe, so to speak, as Space Quest, but that universe was never really a cohesive one with any semblance of established logic or intricate lore to begin with. So the best I can describe it is, whatever the two guys from Andromeda thought was funny at the time. I suppose we should get the obvious question out of the way first. Why isn't this a Space Quest game? Well, for the simple reason that the two guys from Andromeda don't actually own the Space Quest franchise, and they couldn't license it from whoever owned it at the time, that would be Activision, so they decided to make a different game that felt like Space Quest in every way but the name. So our protagonist for this outing is a space plumber named Ace Hardway. As we open the story, he's been sent to do a job fixing the life support system aboard a research facility called the Nostradamus. Yeah, strap yourselves in, because the parody references to sci-fi and pop culture in general are gonna come hard and fast, and they're not letting up. Case in point, we're only 2 minutes into the game, and already we see a janitor sleeping on the job in the storage closet, his suspiciously familiar uniform hanging on a makeshift clothesline next to a workbench littered with comic books from the Space Quest games. And yes, these were actual comic books that were actually released by Malibu Graphics back in the early 90s. Anyway, it's never really explained exactly what kind of research these guys get up to, but from the looks of what they keep around in their specimen containers, I'd hate to see what sushi night looks like around this place. Well, shit, one of the specimen tanks seems kind of broken. I'm sure that has nothing to do with whatever's causing this place to overheat like a weeaboo reading hentai in a sauna, but okay, I take it back. Maybe this does have something to do with it after all. Well, Ace makes quick puree of the tentacle monster, along with any hopes and dreams it may have had of ever reaching the pages of any sauna reading material, and it's off to the escape pod because, of course, the place is about to blow the fuck up around us. Our reward for this heroic deed is to get fired.
What do you mean, dock my pay? Over my dead body? I should have been getting hazard pay for this job. Say again? You're breaking up. Well, maybe I fire you first. How about that? I'm firing you as my boss.
So, right off the bat, we know we're in the right universe. No good deed goes unpunished, and any acts of heroism go unseen in favor of focusing on nitpicky details like the total destruction of a multi-million buckazoid research facility. How this is our problem is anyone's guess, but Ace now finds himself on his ass. Good thing his buddy Scraps has a comfy sofa for it to land on. Unfortunately, during the whole tentacle escapade, Ace's sidekick, a scrappy little robotic dog named Rooter who doubles as a multi-purpose toolbox on legs, got destroyed, and Ace's first order of business, besides actually going into business instead of leaving permanent ass marks on Scraps' sofa, is to get Rooter fixed. This leads to the first of many little mini-games, and this one is actually quite endearing. You go poking around this little dude's electronic brain meats under a nano microscope using these 3 little nanobots in a sequence I can only describe as the Lost Vikings meet amateur brain surgery. You plop these little numbers into their slots with the big guy, you use this little guy to test if the circuits are operational, and you use this third guy to patch up any of the broken conduits. It's simple, but it's fun, and the wonky physics of the objects only adds to the fun if you can believe it. Plus, the music is absolutely kick-ass, probably my favorite track in the entire game. Now, following his epic shit-canning, Ace has decided to go into business for himself, and this just sorta happens around you. You don't have to put any effort into actually setting up shop or attracting clients. That just happens automatically as the game progresses. But you do need a ship, and that's where this little magnetic claw on a crane minigame comes in. You need to salvage engine parts from the scrapyard, which, by the way, looks absolutely stunning. This is my favorite area in the game in terms of just sheer detail and visual stunningness. And this crane minigame minigame feels like it should be a chore on paper, but it's honestly almost therapeutically awesome. And once again, we've got these physics objects, and it's actually great fun to just fling these parts around or dig the claw through the ground and watch them tumble around. Okay, simple pleasures aside, we need one last machine part to complete our spiffy-looking ship. We need a hose for the engine bit, so our welder buddy here can put the finishing touches on our new scrap heap beauty. And by the way, check out the lighting effect here on the interior, and that's just fucking gorgeous, isn't it? Okay, hose time. Well, this dude doesn't have the hose we need, but in true adventure game sociopathic fashion, we just practice a bit of day-to-day vandalism, and Bob's your uncle. Off into the purple yonder we go. Our first job as newly minted self-employed entrepreneur is for none other than the two guys from Andromeda themselves. I mean, what kind of game would this be without a little self-serving self-insertion from the creators themselves? They're working on a top-secret game project for something called the Centauri Corporation, but working is in fact a matter of interpretation, since their mainframe has crashed and they're all too content to just sit around and soak up some U-rays on their fake beach next to their all-too-real, not to mention smelly and clogged-up lagoon. I can't tell if this bit with them just lounging around giving less than -2 zillion fucks about anything is a little on the nose, no pun intended, or if it's so prescient that they may in fact have secretly masterminded the whole "this game took us 10 years to make" debacle just to make sure this joke landed properly. At any rate, Ace fixes up their mainframe, but being a bit of an old-school gamer, not to mention a huge fan of the two guys, he can't resist taking a sneak peek at what it is they're cooking up through this dentist chair from hell interface. What they're cooking up is essentially, no, scratch that, it is entirely the Klugjaeger minigame that was released several years prior to this game as a standalone release on Steam. It's basically a Five Nights at Freddy's clone, but with poultry. And while the concept and execution is pretty spot on, this thing could go to hell for all I care. It may be a testament to how devoted they were to accurately parodying the Five Nights franchise with this thing, because I hate those games, and I hate this son of a clucking bitch too. And you have to play it all the way to the end in order to proceed. Well, I say have to. They mercifully let you skip it, and good fucking lord, let me just jump straight at that skip button with as much fervor as I can muster. Upon completion of the game, Ace finds himself in a Lawnmower Man-esque state of virtual limbo while his real-life counterpart, the one strapped into the dentist chair, is having a merry little fit. So it's up to Rooter to get him out, and the two guys are no fucking help whatsoever because in a display of utmost professionalism and courtesy, they've commandeered Ace's ship and are taking an extended lunch break joyriding around in it. What a pair of fucking heroes, I think we can all agree. So Rooter clogs up the lagoon again, which is what caused the server to malfunction in the first place, and this shuts down the system again, leaving Ace unscathed, at least as far as we know, and with his first paycheck as an independent business owner secured, he's off to the local watering hole Nerp's Landing to check up on a buddy of his. See, this whole Centauri Corporation business is actually pretty big league stuff, and it's being demoed at Andromacon, the largest, possibly onlyest, nerd convention in the galaxy. But Earl here came back from trying the new next-gen Facebox thingy, the same thing that the two guys were building their game for, and came out a little screwy, so clearly something's afoot with this Centauri cesspit. That much has, in fact, already been established with these intermediary cutscenes of this floating bobble-headed bubble baby talking to his AI mother, but come on, are we really playing a Two Guys from Andromeda game for the intricate mystery and plot? No, we're playing it for the laughs, sci-fi puns, and set pieces, so off we fuck to our next destination, fixing an illegal moonshine still on the planet Taturakis. Yeah, let that sink in. Or better yet, let this giant sandworm sink it in for you. The parts that you need to fix the moonshine still have been swallowed by this gargantuan burpazoid, and there's another fun, if somewhat ill-telegraphed, minigame here, where you're literally wading around in its guts, looking for these parts as they bob and weave out of the mass of disgusting entrails. With the still fixed, Ace, oblivious to the fact that it was in fact an illegal moonshining operation, takes a few sips of what he assumes to be water, gets himself absolutely shit-faced, and wakes up to being arrested by this chromatic rent-a-cop who outright tells us point blank that he's dirty and moonlighting as a bounty hunter for the Centauri Corporation. Now, this guy deserves special mention because he's one of those weird-ass anomalies I think you could only find in a Two Guys from Andromeda game. On the surface, yeah, he's just a dumb parody of the T-1000 Terminator, but what's brilliant about him is that he's a walking, talking fourth wall breaker. Now, the two guys from Andromeda are no strangers to breaking the fourth wall. In fact, they've broken it so many times by now that contractors won't even return their calls anymore. But this guy is special. He rarely, if ever, communicates directly with other characters in the game, nor does he technically address the player directly. Instead, he narrates his own actions like he's being followed around by an invisible camera crew, which he isn't, and starring in his own personal cop-sploitation reality show, which he also isn't, to no one in particular, and every other character is either seemingly unaware of this or just doesn't care. He even has his own theme song, which he inexplicably and quite impossibly dances to in outer space. And this goes on for several minutes. This is so brilliant and so stupid at the same time that it does a full loop-de-loop and circles around itself to become brilliant again. Anyway, Centauri Corporation are convinced that Ace must have seen something he shouldn't have when he was inside the two guys' dev rig, so Chrome Boy here captures him and ships him off to Centauri HQ, which for some reason is also where Andromacon is being held. Shut up, don't ask questions. Shortly thereafter, we're introduced to a character whom we've never met before, who has apparently been on our trail since the beginning for reasons that are never even attempted explained. The only thing we need to know about her is that she's a secret operative who knows Centauri are into some bad shit, so she's off to rescue Ace or something. But Rooter's not about to just sit around and wait for that to happen, so he fucking boards Ace's ship and flies off to Andromacon himself. Holy shit, that's a good boy. Good boy. Also, can we just pause for a brief minute here to appreciate the stinging zinger of the name Centauri for a bit? Now, I don't know for a fact if this was intended, but it seems to me that this is a mashup of two real-life companies, Sendent, the company that infamously bought out Sierra Online back in the day before gutting it like a fish and then getting themselves mired in a financial scandal that blew the rest of the desiccated corpse of the once proud beloved game studio to pieces, and Atari, who made a game about E.T. Again, I don't know if that's actually the case, but I wouldn't put it past them, and if so, that is just inspired. Anyway, back to the game. Rooter arrives at Andromacon and meets up with secret agent lady Veronica, who may as well not have had a name because she ends up doing absolutely nothing useful for us. Instead, we scoot through this vent into the inner sanctum where Ace is being held and having his memory erased. Rooter saves the day by completing the first sliding tile puzzle I've ever actually had any fun with, which is actually a pretty impressive feat in its own right. And then Milo, the bubble baby, pops up to do a bit of evil mastermind babbling before iMom shows up to bug out completely and go full Gladys on our asses. Which is actually a bit of brilliant typecasting since she's voiced by Ellen McLaren, who also did the voice of the original Gladys. Ace gives her the full HAL 9000 treatment, shutting down her CPU core, and with that, her nefarious plan of implanting mommy-nagging mind-control software in people's minds that Ace has somehow worked out was her master plan all along. I must have blinked and missed that part. But anyway, that's the game! Off we scoot for tacos with Commanderette Useless here, and also Milo the Bubble Boy, who it turns out wasn't really that evil after all. And even the narrator's like,
wow, really? That's how we're wrapping this thing? Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, that is indeed how the game ends. So, as you can probably tell, this isn't a very plot and story-heavy kind of game. Much like the first 4 Space Quest games that the two guys designed together, this game is more of a ideas first and we'll shoehorn in a plot later kind of affair. And in that sense, it does have that free-spirited, freewheeling, seat-of-your-pants design kind of vibe that the first 4 Space Quest games excelled at. Now, you may be wondering, sure, that may have worked in 1992, but what about this year of our foul space lizard overlord of 2022? How does the stream of consciousness, anything goes as long as it's cool school of design translate to modern audiences? Now, while I can't speak personally for the two guys themselves, my gut feeling is telling me that the answer to that question is, who fucking cares? This game isn't meant for the masses. It has no aspirations of being a AAA title, and it doesn't appear terribly concerned with appealing to a wide audience. Instead, it's a game that sits squarely in a small sub-niche of an already niche genre, and it seems to be quite comfortable there. What I mean by that is, this game was clearly made for fans of Space Quest. If you're on board with the sort of tongue-in-cheek, playfully sadistic nature of the early Space Quest games, then you'll love this. If you're into modern adventure games that focus on broad appeal and respect the rules of narrative structure and puzzle design, then your best bet is to turn around, take a left at the corner of Hotspot Highlight Avenue, get on the Free Hint Freeway off the Tutorial Turnpike, and just keep going as far as you can until you run out of gas. Now, Again, that's just the vibe I'm getting. Who knows, maybe the two guys did envision this game as being the one that would propel them into the mainstream and become household names, but I have my serious doubts about that. What I'm trying to say is, as far as game design and story goes, this is essentially just a jumble of wouldn't it be cool if ideas, strung together by a bare-bones plot that just really seems tacked on to give it some semblance of cohesion. And if you've ever played a Space Quest game, you know exactly what I mean. Why is there a tourist trap on Fleep Hut? Why is there a cave squid in the caverns of Labion? Why is there a space mall with a zero-G skating rink in the future of Space Quest 10? The answer is no reason, other than it sounded like a cool idea, so they put it in the game. And the same goes for SpaceVenture. It's got that, hey, I have a great idea, freestyle feel to it, and if that works for you, then cool, and if not, tough shit. So, the spirit of Space Quest is indeed alive and well with this. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that this game has some of the most inspired set pieces that the two guys have ever come up with. I skipped over this bit in my overview because, again, this has no bearing on the overall story whatsoever, but Ace's ship runs on waste. Not Mr. Fusion waste, no, actual human and or alien bio waste. Shit, it runs on shit. And at one point your ship runs out of fuel, so Ace stops by a Taco Nova restaurant, waits for this bunch of space tourists to order and eat their tacos, after which they all go and take a massive touristy dump, and then Ace siphons the waste out of the restaurant's toilet hatch. Problem solved. Is it crass? Sure, but it's also funny as hell. So, that's the game in a nutshell, but how does it actually play? Well, unfortunately, this is where things start to fall apart a bit, at least in the version that I played, which was the backers-only pre-Steam release. You may recall that an early decision in development was to eschew any already available game development tools in favor of creating their own adventure game engine within Unity for the game. And while that may have sounded liberating on paper, I'm sure the team must have cursed this decision on more than one occasion during development. Kudos for trying to go the DIY route and not let existing tools dictate what can and cannot be done in a game, but it really does seem to have bitten them in the ass in the long run. For starters, the UI glitches out all the time. The worst offenders seem to be these inserts that pop up to let you inspect something up close. Here, I've somehow triggered this close-up of a moonshine still, but the game still thinks I'm somewhere else, so the camera is now locked off and I'm unable to go anywhere. I'm essentially soft-locked here. Or here where I'm supposed to rub this gel on the imprint on Mark's nose, but the game thinks the close-up isn't active for some reason, so even though this is the right solution, nothing is happening. Until all of a sudden, when I try again for the 1000th time, it suddenly works. Click sensors are also borked in these close-ups, so sometimes you're able to click through them and look at stuff that's behind the close-up, and sometimes even accidentally click on room exits instead of the thing in the close-up you're actually trying to click on. The camera also frequently seems to bug out and lose track of where Ace is in the game world. For the most part, the camera is locked off and will pan and zoom to reveal more of an area as you move through it, but sometimes you're able to bypass one of these camera transitions and get Ace stuck at the edge of a screen while the camera still thinks you're in another area. So you end up running around in these stupid little circles trying to get the camera to follow you again, which sometimes works, and other times you simply have to pray that you're near a screen exit so you can leave and come back and hope the camera will have reset itself. So, overall, there's quite a bit of jank going on in terms of actual gameplay, and the game really needs a tune-up in this department. It may seem like small nitpicky stuff, but it really adds up to a lot when you're playing the game, because the last thing you want in an adventure game is to sit there and wonder, am I wrong, or is the game bugging out on me? And unfortunately, with the sort of playfully sadistic puzzles that sometimes screw with normal expectations of how adventure games are played that the two guys are known for, the last thing you need is to be constantly second-guessing yourself because you've tried everything, only to later realize that you were indeed on the right track. The game was just freaking out on you. And some of the puzzles really just boil down to trial and error, like this bit where you're meant to lure Chrome Cop away from the elevator. What you're meant to do is just run around in the crowd until he loses sight of you, but it takes far too long for that to happen, and you end up second-guessing if that's really what you're supposed to do or if this is another bug. Even after looking at a walkthrough and knowing that this was indeed the correct solution, it still took me way too many tries to get this to work. And what boggles my mind is how they can have complicated setups like this magnetic claw machine minigame, or being able to fly Ace's ship through space down flawlessly, but not simple things like disabling background hotspot when a pop-up is open. So, bottom line, as the game is now in its version 1.0 iteration, it is a great game that ticks all the boxes for what I'd ever want in a Two Guys from Andromeda game in terms of humor, writing, music, wild set pieces, voice acting is brilliant, but it's unfortunately being held back by technical details. And these are things that the team desperately need to fix, in my opinion, before they put the game up on Steam for the world to experience, because the technical issues really don't mesh with the amount of irreverent, hey, we don't give a fuck attitude that this game tries to convey. It's like what Mel Brooks said about parody. If you're gonna parody something, you have to be just as good as the thing you're trying to parody. And likewise, if you're gonna have a game that's all about carefree fun and teasing the player, you don't want that player to be constantly second-guessing if they're just dumb or if the game is bugging out. So here's hoping that the team gets all of this shit sorted in time for the public release, because what we've got here is indeed, for my money, a solid experience that has all the makings of a cult classic. Sure, it took way too long to make, and it's not going to set the world on fire and be a massive blockbuster or anything, but I don't think that's what the two guys set out to do anyway. They wanted to make a game that would make Space Quest fans happy, and more importantly, make a game that they themselves would like to play. And that's always been their mode of operation, I feel. As far back as the first Space Quest game in 1986, the two guys have always made games that felt like they were making games primarily for themselves, something that they would enjoy playing, something that they felt was missing from any other game out there, so they decided to just do it themselves. And if others were along for the ride, great. If not, what are you gonna do? And I, for one, am absolutely along for the ride, but let's be honest here. Were you really expecting an objective, unbiased opinion from someone who calls himself the Space Quest historian? I didn't think so, and you shouldn't. I like the game. I'm happy I finally got to play it, and if you ask me, anything that's currently wrong with the game is something that's easily fixed with a little more spit and polish. If you don't like it, then I honestly don't really care, and I don't think the two guys do either. So, that's that. I'm the Space Quest historian, and I'll see you around the Chrono Stream. Bye!